Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here tonight to film my favorite reads of 2018. And this will be the fiction edition of my favorite reads of 2018. I have 15 books total here, I think, and these are not the best books of 2018. I'm not qualified to judge the best books of 2018. These are simply my favorite reads of all the fiction that I read in 2018. I read 151 books total, and of those books, these were the 15 best fiction. In my opinion, these were my favorite reads. They touched me either emotionally, they made me feel something, or there was something intellectually stimulating about them. And generally, for me to have a favorite book, it's a book that I will want to reread someday in the future, or I can see myself rereading it someday in the future. So the first 10 books are in no particular order, and then the last 5 will be ranked 5 to first, with the last book that I talk about being the best book that I read, in my opinion, in 2018. So let's just get through it. I'm not going to talk about any of these books in detail because in almost all cases, I talked about them in previous videos earlier this year, and so you're probably all tired of me talking about them. So let's get going. The first book I wanted to rave about as an excellent read is Brave by Svetlana Chmakova. This is a middle grade graphic novel, and it tells the story of Jensen, who is in middle school and he's having a hard time. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He's pretty awkward. He's struggling with his math. He's not doing well with that. He struggles to find his place in the world, basically. And he, by happenstance, gets involved in the school newspaper with these two young ladies, and hijinks ensue, and he finds his place. And I just found this to be a heartwarming, just a cozy read and a feel-good read, and sometimes we just need one of those. The second book I would like to tell you about is a fantasy book that I read during the year. This was my year to read through the entire Robin Hobb Elderling series, and most of those books were not the best books that I read, but they were all super enjoyable. I loved every one of them. I listened to most of them on audio, but the one book out of that series that I truly loved beyond anything, I just thought it was, it just hit my heart in all the right places, and I just absolutely loved it, and that was Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. I will try to insert a picture of it up here so you can see what the cover looks like. Obviously, you can't pick this one up because it's quite far into the series, and you do need to start with Assassin's Apprentice, I think, is the first one. I'll put the name of the first book in the whole series down below so you can find that out if you're interested. The next book is Allegedly by Tiffany Jackson. This is a YA book about a young girl who is in a I guess a home, some sort of a detention center, but it's in a house setting with other young women who have been in trouble with the law. She has been accused of, I believe it was killing the baby that was under her mother's care. Her mother was babysitting a baby, and the baby died, and she gets blamed for it. And it's a very twisty-turny suspense novel. Excellent. I did not see the ending coming. It blew me away. I love this book. The next one is another YA, and that's Dear Martin by Nick Stone. And this book was a series of letters that a young boy writes to Martin Luther King Jr. as he struggles with race issues in his own life, and teenage violence in his own life. Just an excellent read, and one that's very appropriate for our current climate. Another book that I truly loved this year, and that was Foreign Soil by Maxine Beneba Clarke. This is a short story collection that I read with Russell through his Ink and Paper book club, where we read a different book in each month from a different continent, and this was our pick for Australia, I believe. So these stories all have to do with immigration. They have to deal with violence against women, lots of different social issues. Each story is very distinct from the other, I felt, and I really, really loved some of them. I mean, as with any short story collection, there were stories that spoke to me more than others, but overall, this whole collection was just really powerful and impactful, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Another book that I read this year and loved is When I Hit You by Mena Kandasamy. And this book is a book that I probably would never have even heard about or had it on my radar except for the Women's Prize for Fiction list. This was on that list in 2018, and it just sounded so fascinating to me. It was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It's written from the point of view of a young woman in India who meets a man and very quickly marries him and then finds herself in an abusive relationship and what she does about that. And I just found it so powerful and so riveting, and the voice was so different from other books that I have read, and I just really was very compelling to me, and I thought the authorial style was really unique and interesting. So I just really enjoyed that story, and I guess enjoyed is probably a wrong word for a book about domestic violence, but it, again, emotionally I connected with it, so I have to recommend it and have it on this top list of my favorite reads. The next one is another book that I read on audio, and that is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I feel like my year-end lists are no longer complete without a Fredrik Backman book. A Man Called Ove was one of my top reads, if not my top read, a few years ago. And each year it seems like as I slowly make my way through his works, I'm finding a book to love every year from his published works, and Beartown is no different. This is the story of a hockey town in one of the Scandinavian countries, I think Sweden, where the town basically is a small town, and the only thing they have is hockey. And what happens when a young teenage girl from the town, the coach's daughter, accuses one of the hockey stars of rape. And it was a really, it just was a story that pulled me along, and the characters were neither black or white in any case. There was shades of gray throughout. Everybody had flaws, but everybody also had good points to them. It was very different from A Man Called Ove, but in the end, it was just as heartwarming. So I definitely love that, and I can't wait to read the sequel to that in the upcoming year. A book that I read, I think I read it for Black History Month, but I can't remember for sure, a sci-fi book, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I read this one. I've been wanting to read all of Octavia Butler's works, and I'm sort of slowly picking my way through them. And this one is about a dystopian near future United States where the gap between the have and have-nots has widened to the point where the people who have economic, sort of upper economic lifestyle live within these gated communities, and everybody else is extremely poor and lives on the outside of these gated communities, and there's a lot of violence and a lot of looting as people try to survive. And as that society totally collapses, this young woman is she like a messiah figure, or is she like starting her own religion? What is she doing? She's drawing people to her and sort of leading them from this place of violence and to another community where they can all live together and sort of work toward the greater good. Fascinating story. Really diverse characters. The main character is a young black girl, a teenager, and all of the characters are very diverse. It's just a refreshing take on the dystopian future novel. And then the next one is a reread. I reread A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr with a group of booktubers earlier this year, and this is the second time I've read A Month in the Country, and it was even better for me this time around than it was the first time. It's a short book, almost a novella, I think, if not a novella, about a man who returns from the war in England from World War One, and is hired to go out into this small English village and restore a painting in a church. And he sort of connects with different members of the community, and it basically has all of the elements of human nature get touched on through this short story, and it's just beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's really an elegant novel, and I just loved it. I got so much more out of it this time around. Of course, the buddy read helped because everybody giving their opinions and talking about it really helps pull out all the elements of the story, but also just this second time around, I was able to just see things that I had missed the first time, and it just is a novel that speaks to me. And then the last novel before my top 5 is Lethal White by Robert Galbraith. This is the 4th book, I think, in the Cormoran Strike mystery series by Robert Galbraith, who is also who is in other parts of her life known as J.K. Rowling. And I love to listen to these on audiobook. They are fantastic on audio. Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling, I find her to be excellent with her characters. I really love the characters in the Cormoran Strike series, especially the two main protagonists, Cormoran Strike, who's the detective, and then his trusty sidekick, Robin. And there is a sort of will they, won't they romance type thing going on between the two of them, and that sort of, it doesn't get taken to the place that I wanted it to get taken to in Lethal White, but it progresses. And they're just fun mystery suspense reads, and with great characters and just a fun setting. So I really enjoy those. I again listen to those on audiobook, and they're done really well on audio. And now for my top 10 favorite fiction reads of the year. The number 5 in the number 5 position is Homefire by Kamila Shamsie. Again, this is a book that I probably would not have read except that it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and I read the ones from the shortlist that I was truly interested in, and this was one of them. And this is the story of 3 siblings who are Muslim, but they are British Muslims. The oldest sister is living in America, going to school in America when her mother dies, and she comes home to help take care of her younger siblings. And this is a book about immigration and about being part in a group that is considered the other, and how you fit in and what you do to fit in. And I really found it to be a fabulous book. It is also, I guess, a retelling of Antigone, I think it is, but I don't know anything about classical tales like that from the Greek, so that part didn't play into it for me, but it might for you. Just a great story. I just thought that the themes of this novel really spoke to me, and I was kind of blown away. The very first part of the book, there's a scene where the oldest sister is in the airport, and what she goes through as she tries to check through customs, it just encapsulated the whole feel of the book for me, and I just loved it. And then in the number 4 position is a chunker of a book that I read this year called Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This is a Western. I read it for the Read Harder Challenge, for the Western prompt. I had tried to read this book in the past and had not gotten beyond the first 80 pages or something. I figured I'd give it another try this year. It is a huge book. Absolutely loved it this time around. For whatever reason, it was the right book for me at the right time. It is a sweeping epic of a story. You're following 2 semi-retired U.S. Rangers who have settled on a ranch in, I believe, Texas. And one of the rangers wants to have one last, basically, adventure. He wants to drive cattle from Texas all the way up to Montana, I believe it is. And the other one isn't so sure about that, but he's willing to give it a go. So they round up all their ranch hands and they set off on this journey. And along the way, they basically encounter all the last vestiges of the American West. It's a sweeping epic, and it's a wonderful story. And the characters are just so they're just so archetypical, or is that even a word? It's like archetypes of the American West. I will say that women don't get a lot of time on the page in this book, but it really evokes a feeling of a certain time and a certain place. And I just loved it. I just fell into it, and I just went along for the ride, and it was a wonderful story. And then in the number 3 position, I have a book by a favorite author, and that is Flight Behavior by Barbara Kingsolver. This book, I let languish on my TBR shelves for far too long. This was the year of Kingsolver for me, and this book really brought home to me how much I love her writing. It deals with a young wife and mother in a U.S. southeastern state. I can't remember if it's North Carolina or South Carolina, and it doesn't really matter, because she is like I said, a young mother, a young wife, and she is discontented with her life. And she lives a very small life. Her husband is a farmer, and he is very much under the thumb of his mother and his parents, and they sort of live on the property, and this young woman is chafing under the restrictions of always being under the watchful gaze of her mother-in-law and her father-in-law. She has 2 children, I believe, and she's also chafing against their young children, and she's chafing against their needs, which are always, front and center. And she's chafing against her lack of education and her lack of opportunities, and into her life comes this natural phenomenon that she sort of stumbles into. And because of this natural phenomenon that has to do with climate change, she gets to know a bunch of scientists, and she gets sort of drawn into their project to study this natural phenomenon. And as she does that, she realizes that there are areas in her life that she can change, and there are things that she can do to broaden her own horizons. And that doesn't mean, she has to decide whether it's worth blowing up her life as she's always known it, and sort of striking out and taking the risk and going for it. And there's awesome nature and science writing in this that I loved. The main character, I've got to look up her name because Della Robbia. The main character is unusual in fiction in that she's a young woman from a poor rural family. This is not a voice you often hear, I don't think. It's not a voice I had read very often. And I just was fascinated by her needs and her desires and her wants, and her struggling with all of that and trying to figure out what it was okay for her to want and desire. Like how okay would it be for her to go after what she wanted when she had all these other people depending on her. And I just thought it was beautiful, and I would highly, highly recommend this and other things by Barbara Kingsolver. And then in the number 2 position is The Overstory by Richard Powers. This is a book that's been, has been getting a lot of critical acclaim. It has been on a lot of prize lists. It is a book about trees. And, the whole story sort of centers around people's interactions with the natural world of forests and trees. And I loved it. Of course, science and nature writing, it's my thing. And this has beautiful and super interesting, I thought, passages about trees and forest lands and how human actions have impacted trees and forest land, and then the characters that are sort of interwoven into the story. Like the first 150 pages seem like completely disconnected short stories about these different characters, and then after the 150 page mark, they start each individual story starts to become interwoven into this broader storyline of what we're doing to forests and trees. And yeah, the narrative can get a little off on tangents and a little wandering, but because I was interested in the subject matter, to me, I just loved it and would have happily read even more of the science and nature descriptive writing. But I can see how there are those of you out there that wouldn't find that very compelling. I just personally found it super compelling. It really spoke to me. The themes of what we've done to the earth and what we owe the earth and what could we do about what we've done if we did want to do something about it. I found that all to be really fascinating, and I just love the story. And then the number one book, my best book, my favorite book of the year is Women Talking by Miriam Toews, who is a Canadian author. And in this book, she is telling the story of a Mennonite community in South America where the women, and this is based on a true story, the women were raped by the men, a group of men from their community who would drug them with animal tranquilizers and then take advantage of them. And then when they tried to come forward with their concerns and their, horror at what had happened, they were sort of told they were being crazy until one woman didn't get drugged enough and woke up in the middle of being violated. And then it's like this whole story is about these women basically sitting together and going through their options, talking through their options of do they, stay in that community and just suck it up? Do they fight back or do they leave? And the whole book is these women sitting around and talking over their lives and what their options are. And it just blew me away. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing story. I can't say enough about it. I know it's not out yet in the US. I had to buy my copy through Book Depository because it's out in the UK and you can get it through Book Depository. I just hope that everybody reads this book. I think in our current social and cultural place in the world with the Me Too movement and really talking about the autonomy of women and what women have to deal with in our culture, this book really shines a very sharp light on a lot of issues that are very, very relevant in all cultures today, not just in the Mennonite community. But the way that this story is told, with the group of women basically having a meeting and talking through their options, brilliant. Just brilliant. This book really, it would take a lot for another fiction book to top this for me. So we'll see what happens in 2019, but this book could be my favorite book of all time. We'll see. I don't know. Anyway, 2019, fabulous reading year. I am super excited to get into 2019 and see what discoveries are out there for me to find. Thank you all for watching. I will be posting a nonfiction favorites video soon, and I will talk to you later.